Hello community, Naomi Anderson here from Aged Care Ready and founder of the Aging Parent Support Group on Facebook. Welcome to episode number 7 of our community interviews with experts in the aged care sector. Tonight, I'm very happy to be joined by Patrick Curlis from Mint Financial Solutions. Welcome, Patrick.
Good evening.
Thanks for joining us this late on a Monday night. I'm sure this is exactly what you wanted to do at 8:30.
No, we're doing well. We're doing well. As long as the kids don't break through the room, we'll be fine.
That's all right. We've all been there. There's been a number of times where my son's actually joined us, so it wouldn't be the first time. Don't worry about it. So tonight we're actually talking about means testing and the fees associated with that for aged care. But before we get into that, I would really love to know a little bit more about you and Mint Financial Solutions.
Okay, so Mint Financial Solutions itself was founded about 6 years ago. I joined the team close to 3 years ago. There's about 5 planners there. We were based in Knox, so we were sort of servicing the eastern regions a lot, and have recently moved the office. They bought an office out in Oakley, but of course all of our clients are out in the east. So I live out here in the hills anyway, so it works really well for me to sort of skip between the two. But yeah, and I do all manner of financial planning, but I have a special joy and a special love for aged care.
Yeah, I think it takes a special type no matter what your field within the aged care sector is. Just a reminder for the community who are watching us live that if you do have any questions, please ask them in the comments section below. I will be looking. But without a further ado, let's get started. So, Patrick, what is a means-tested fee?
So the means-tested fee is the amount that, if you're in aged care, is the amount that you need to pay because you have the means to do it.
Okay.
It's most simply put that way, I suppose. The more assets / income you have determines what your means-tested fee will be. So they do a test checking both your income and your assets, and whichever works out best for them is the one they go with.
Okay. And so does that mean then that this affects the aged care pension?
Yes. So, well, the amount that you pay with the means tested fee, if you pay more, then you're generally going to have less aged pension, and vice versa. So it's a double whammy. If you are a part pensioner and your assets increase for whatever reason, so some of your shares increase quite a lot or whatnot, then you will then have to pay more means tested fee and you'll get less age pension as well.
Right. Okay. So it kind of checks and balances, really. It's like a sliding scale almost.
It is. It is. So yeah, people under certain levels won't have a means tested fee at all.
Okay.
But that's quite low, the low means residents.
Yeah. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Are there any strategies to reduce the means tested fee and increase the aged care pension?
There's a few out there. There's a lot less than there used to be. But there are, if you are borderline, so close to receiving a pension, or but not yet getting it, or a part pensioner, there are ways that you can reallocate your assets such that they are considered in a different way for settling purposes. Now, sometimes that might assist the age pension, and it might not help the means-tested fee, or other times it'll be both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's essentially just shuffling things around on paper, is that right?
Yes, to a point. And so certain assets are considered 100% of their value by Centrelink, and other ones that you have will be considered differently. So that the same $100,000 isn't considered 100 grand; it's considered 60 grand, for example.
Right.
In which case, if that were the case, then that's going to increase your age pension amount, because you don't have as much means, and therefore again reduce the means fee at the same time.
Yeah. And so when you're saying assets, it's not just necessarily the home that your loved one is living in. It could be investments. It could be investment properties.
Yeah, sorry, financial assets.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So
yeah,
anything
so that
along
could be
those
anything
lines.
from, as you say, real estate, property, money in the bank, annuities, so term deposits, all different types of things, or even your car and your goods as well.
Yeah. Okay. So back to the means-tested fee, when that is relatable to going into an aged care facility, for example, is that fee then contributing towards that person's care? Is that how that works?
The means-tested fee, the amount you pay, is ostensibly because you have the means to do it. So you could be sitting next to a person who you might be paying $5 a day for your means-tested fee. The person next to you might be paying $40 a day for his because he's got more means, but you'll get the same service. So it's not it's not specifically because they pay a higher means-tested fee than you're getting silver service. No.
Yeah. Okay. So at the end of the day, in a very simplistic explanation, a person would have to pay the refundable accommodation deposit or the daily accommodation payment, plus the basic daily fee, correct? Any extra services fees that the facility may charge. And then you are means tested.
That's correct.
And you may need to contribute a little bit extra.
True. And take into account as well, when you do, because if you are coming into aged care, you may have been dealing with Centrelink beforehand and you've had assets and income tests before. Yeah. So the assets and income test itself you're doing isn't different. However, the way it's treated for Centrelink purposes and for aged care purposes are different as well. So some assets are counted and some assets are not counted. The perfect example is quite often the family home might be counted, or a portion of that counted for aged care, whereas it won't be for the normal Centrelink age pension.
Yeah. And I guess that it gets a little bit more complicated than in a situation where there's a couple and one person needs care and the other one doesn't. Is that right?
It does. It very much does, especially in the situation where, if they've got means and they need to pay a RAD, then they're in a bit of strife because they've got to find $400,000, $300,000, or whatever that happens to be, that number. And generally people don't have that in bank accounts. But if they are of lower means, then you might find that the first person goes in and doesn't have to pay the RAD and those types of things, and probably won't have a means tested fee either. They'll have the basic daily care fee, of course, and if there's extra services, whatnot. But yeah, but then the second person, by that time, if they're moving in, then the house is more than likely going to be counted, or at least $170,000 worth of it, which will at least make sure that they're RAD paid.
Yeah. Okay. So obviously it's very dependent on each individual situation, and we're not here to give advice today. It's just more general information. Yeah.
Yes.
So in terms of the means tested fee, is there a cap to that? What if somebody has a huge amount of assets?
Yeah, so in a situation like that, they will be paying the maximum amount.
Yep.
So these will be the few. There aren't a lot, but there are some out there in aged care who are not being subsidised by the government anyway. So they're paying the maximum means tested amount. So it's about $28,000. It changes twice a year, but it's about $28,000 a year that would be capped out at the moment. And there's also a lifetime cap. That lifetime is $67,409. I just checked. Yeah. Just to make sure that's what it's right. And
so I guess my question to that is, how many assets, or what is the value, like the maximum value that somebody needs to have in assets to be paying that maximum amount? Is that also a sliding scale, or is there?
No, it's the same. It's the same thing. So just like from on one end, you'll, like it's true. You'll get to a point where, if you've got $1.5 million plus available, then you're in a situation where you can afford it according to the government. And so if that's the case, like I don't know, I couldn't tell you the exact number where it caps out, but yeah, there is that amount there. But look, if a person has a reasonable amount of wealth and $28,000 is used, after 2 and a bit years, that lifetime cap is used up. At the same time, $28,000 is a fair bit of money you're paying annual basis for additional to all the other costs.
That's a huge amount of money that you could potentially be paying each year. So it's not just that $28,000; it's the additional payments as well. That's on top of that. Yeah. So then, I guess if somebody has that many assets, can't they just gift them away to family? Would that work? And then that would therefore minimise their assets?
They can gift them, but it's not going to help them. It'll help their family heaps. Yeah. It's all gifts. But no, if you give anything more than $10,000 in a year, or $30,000 over a 5-year period, but if you give any more than that 10 grand in that year, then that amount, even though you've given it away, so if you gave $100,000 away, then $90,000 is still considered an asset for the next 5 years.
Right.
So that doesn't help you in any way.
So that's not useful at all then?
No.
Okay.
It'd be more helpful to lose it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like actually lose it. But, it have to be justified.
Yeah. Something that I'm asked quite often from an aged care ready point of view is, my mum or dad doesn't have any assets. How can they get care?
If they have no assets whatsoever, then they'll still be paying the basic daily fee like everybody does.
Yeah.
But then if they have no assets, they'll be on a full pension, which allows them to pay that amount.
Yeah.
But yeah, in that situation, the government will subsidise that person entirely.
Okay.
Other than the basic daily fee.
Yeah.
And so therefore they get 15% of their pension as play money.
Yeah.
Effectively to live. And they're looked after.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to. It is quite low in terms of the amount of assets.
And when you say they get looked after by the government, does that mean that the government is actually paying their daily accommodation payment on their behalf?
Not the daily fee.
Yeah.
But there is no daily accommodation payment because there's no RAT, there's no amount. They're not a rate paying person or resident.
Yeah.
So they there is nothing to pay. And once if you are assessed that way at the start, then and then you move into a facility, then regardless of what happens afterwards, you're always going to be assessed that way too. You're not going to then change to becoming a rad payer if you come into money or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is
okay.
unlikely at that stage.
So is that what they call a fully supported person? Yeah. So from a facility perspective, I guess that probably wouldn't be the ideal client that they would want. Is that right?
They don't really have a choice though, to do it because they're part of the aged care system in Victoria.
I'm pretty sure that there is a percentage of beds in facilities that have to be allowed for fully supported places. Yeah.
So they must be available, especially in a situation where they have no means. There has to be some sort of the government have worked it out. We've got good social services.
Yeah. It's good to know that it's good to know that it's not the end of the world if you don't actually have that big lump sum of money to pay to get into aged care, and that you will still actually have a place and be looked after as you age.
Yeah, but see, I mean, look, the vast majority of people who go into aged care as well usually, have something that's over 100 odd grand.
Yeah.
Usually, and that therefore tips them into being rate payers. And a lot of people will have just their home.
Yeah.
They bought it for 28 grand in the 70s, and now it's worth $1 million.
Yeah.
So, and that's another thing as well, is that it's a great leveler, aged care, I suppose, because it's a very high percentage of couples or people who are homeowners that move into aged care will end up selling their home to fund.
Yeah.
Because paying the daily accommodation payment, just paying interest for nothing, interest, isn't very enjoyable. It's not a good feeling. When somebody's paid a rad, it's like, it's not great either, but at least it's an investment that
yeah. I think the way that you've explained it to me before is like you're renting versus buying. So essentially the rad is you're buying that room, which will be refunded to your estate after you pass away, and that DAP is more like renting. So once you pay it, it's gone, and that's it.
There's no equity, no building anything.
Yeah.
And I mean, sometimes you have to do it for a period of time whilst funds are being made available. A lot of people do have a period of time for the first few months,
especially if they're selling their home.
Yeah. And some will use a portion of, pay a part of it just to reduce the amount of DAP that they have to pay. That they have to pay until they've got the full amount for their refundable accommodation deposit.
Sure.
But yeah, it's a huge time and step in someone's life, and it's not easy. They don't make it easy.
Yeah.
They don't make it easy for people who are constantly looking at it. They're constantly focusing on it, let alone somebody who has never looked at it before.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to add about the means testing and how that happens? Is it something that has to be retested every now and then, or is it just a once-off test?
No, that's an ongoing thing, means testing. So you might be asked, but also you are required, if your circumstances change, within a couple of weeks to update centrally, give the information to my aged care as well.
Sure.
So and once you do that, then whatever results will happen, your age pension will increase, decrease, or whatever goes on. But yeah, it's a ever changing thing. So if you lost money, then lost a lot of money, then your Centrelink age pension would increase. But then obviously lost a bucket load of money, so that's not the ideal scenario.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's fluid. Yeah. Okay. And the numbers change as well, like probably with all of the discussions you had with aged care, that twice a year all of these things change. So all the numbers that you've got increase basically, indexed. So look, the most important thing I can do is just do some research, look up some specific questions. Just type in a specific question, and sooner or later you'll be able to find somebody who's got that specific answer.
Yeah. What I've also come across is that with these means tested, the paperwork that has to actually be done, it's quite confusing and confronting for a lot of families. And I guess that
paperwork too.
Yeah. And I guess from my standpoint, what I always recommend to clients is to actually see a financial planner to do this on your behalf, because if you get it wrong, it can actually cost you a lot of money.
Yeah. Exactly. It can. And there's a few little tricks and traps within that application itself. And even if the application went smoothly, it doesn't necessarily ever, even if you do it online, it doesn't just go completely smoothly, but the financial planner will be there just to sort of assist your mood as well, as you're like, they want this as well.
Yeah.
I gave that to them already.
Yeah.
Sometimes just having a person there to keep prodding you along to make sure that it gets done, and you know that it's getting done the right way.
Exactly.
Is big. But yeah, just like when you're going in, if you've got somebody to assist you with doing negotiations, there's so much value in that. If you can save somebody 150 grand before they walk in, your family's gonna love you forever, type of thing. So
yeah.
But yeah. It's not complicated. Well, no, sorry, I'm not going to say it's not complicated. There's not a lot involved. It's just that there's a few moving parts that are all moving at the same time. So it makes it a little bit more complicated to net down exactly what's going on at any time.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us tonight, Patrick. Your knowledge was very, very valuable to our community, I'm sure. And if anybody has any questions for Patrick, you can ask them below, or you can contact him through Mint Financial Solutions. Thanks again for joining us, and good night.
Thank you.